In 1974, Cass Elliot died, taking one of her biggest secrets to the grave. No one knew who the biological father of her child was, until one day when Elliot's bandmate Michelle Phillips discovered his identity, and it was the biggest shock of all. Cass Elliot was the breakout star of the folk rock band The Mamas and the Papas, but her stage presence masked her tragic true story of unrequited love, embarrassing career mistakes, and dangerous secret experimentation. Cass Elliot was born in Baltimore, Maryland in September 1941, into a family of Russian Jewish immigrants. Her childhood was overshadowed by financial hardship and the limitations imposed by poverty. But even during those tough years, Cass carried within her a radiant energy, a vibrant, witty personality, and a voice that could stop anyone in their tracks. However, that light came with shadows. From a young age, Cass faced stigma because of her weight, a psychological wound that would follow her throughout her life. At school, she was often mocked by her peers, but instead of breaking down, Cass found a second home on stage, a place that gave her warmth and hope. There, she could be herself, to sing, to tell stories, and most importantly, to be loved for her talent rather than her appearance. Inspired by Peggy Cass, a renowned comedienne, and the name of a late friend, she adopted the stage name Cass Elliot. This alter ego helped her escape her insecurities and become the woman she dreamed of being, confident, strong, and bold. Cass dropped out of high school and moved to New York to pursue an acting career. But Broadway turned its back on her after losing a key role to Barbara Strand. Still, Cass didn't give up. She shifted to music, believing it would open a new path. In the mid-1960s, Cass formed the Big Three, and later, the Mugwumps, humble but promising beginnings that laid the foundation for the legendary band The Mamas and the Papas. It was during her time with the Mugwumps that Cass Elliot met Denny Doherty, the man who would capture her heart so completely, she was willing to follow him to the ends of the earth. But that love, cruelly, was never returned. Instead of ending up with Denny, Cass entered into a strange marriage with James Hendrix, the group's guitarist, in 1963. It wasn't a romance, but rather a sham marriage to help Hendrix avoid military service. Cass understood that clearly, and she accepted it, because the only thing that connected them was music. 8 months later, the Mugwumps disbanded, and Cass struck out on her own, hoping Denny would follow. But he joined a new group, the New Journeymen, with married couple John and Michelle Phillips. Cass Elliot was willing to do anything to share the stage with Denny Doherty, the man she loved. By then, Denny had rejected Cass because of her weight, but he couldn't deny her talent, and he knew she was the missing piece of the New Journeymen. Still, John Phillips didn't want Cass in the band. He claimed her voice was too low for the group's range. But publicly, Phillips gave a different excuse. He stated that Cass's voice didn't suit the New Journeyman's style. Behind closed doors, however, he harshly criticized her appearance. Phillips believed Cass was too heavy to join the group. Her already fragile confidence struggled to survive that brutal truth throughout her career and life. In an era where slender women like Audrey Hepburn were considered the beauty standard, Cass became a symbol of not fitting the mold, both physically and spiritually. Cass felt she had no shot, despite John Phillips's repeated rejections. According to Michelle Phillips, Cass desperately wanted to join the new band to get closer to success. She even followed the group wherever they went. What they put her through was truly cruel. They made her serve drinks for them and even mocked her by allowing her to rehearse with them, but not perform. Fortunately for Cass, when John and Michelle's new band ran out of money and places to stay, they had no one left to turn to, and they knew the only person who might take them in was Cass. Desperate for a roof over their heads, they showed up at her home in Los Angeles, and she gave them an offer they couldn't refuse. If they wanted her help, she would become part of the band. Cass took advantage of their tough situation. Whether John liked her appearance or not, he had to agree to let her join the group or sleep on the street. But there was another version of how Cass joined the band, one that persisted for years. The official story claimed that it wasn't poor money management, but fate that brought Cass and the new journeyman together. According to this version, Cass accompanied the band on a trip to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. While there, she was walking past a construction site when a metal pipe fell and hit her on the head. The head injury supposedly allowed her to sing in a higher range, exactly what John Phillips had been looking for. That almost mythical story was passed around for years, but later, those close to the band revealed the truth. It was just a cover for a shameful reality. John had rejected Cass purely because of how she looked. He feared the public would learn he had deeply hurt her over her weight, something Cass, despite trying to hide, never forgot. Whatever the truth was, Cass eventually joined the band after an inspired night when the group gave themselves a name: the Mamas and the Papas. Cass's voice quickly became the heart of hits like California Dreamin' and Monday, Monday. But the spotlight couldn't hide the pain. Even at the peak of their fame, Cass endured cruel jokes about her weight. John, Michelle, and Denny even mocked her in their song Creek Alley with the line, "No one's getting fat except Mama Cass." That offensive lyric left fans stunned, and Cass was deeply hurt that the nickname Mama Cass stuck with her. After Cass Elliot finally joined the Mamas and the Papas, it seemed like everything had fallen into place. But behind the hit records was a heartbreak she could never escape. Cass didn't join the group just for the music. She joined for Denny Doherty, the bandmate she loved deeply. That love, though burning bright, was met only with silence and betrayal. When Cass confessed her feelings, Denny didn't return them. Instead, he began a relationship with Michelle Phillips, the one woman Cass both admired and envied. When Denny finally admitted the affair, Cass was devastated. In her heartbreak, she broke down in tears and said to Michelle, "You could have any man in the world. Why did it have to be the only one I love?" That pain stayed with Cass for years. Denny later admitted that Cass even proposed to him one drunken night, but he didn't accept. To fill that void, Cass threw herself into music, but also began to spiral into drugs and alcohol, trying to numb her shattered heart. By 1967, as the group reached the peak of its fame, Cass flew to London ahead of her bandmates to prepare for an upcoming performance. But instead of stepping into the spotlight, she was met by the police. The London authorities arrested Cass on charges of stealing bed sheets from a rental apartment. However, rumors quickly spread that the theft was just a cover story. The police actually suspected her of having ties to a drug dealer named PCK Dawson, who was rumored to be her lover and supplier. Cass spent a night in a cold London jail, facing the possibility of prosecution. But ultimately, all charges were dropped due to lack of evidence. Following the scandalous arrest in London, a wave of negative headlines forced the Mamas and the Papas to cancel their scheduled performance. It also marked the end of Cass Elliot's time with the band. She walked away with a broken heart, bitter lyrics, and a burning desire to stand on her own through the power of her voice. Cass decided to pursue a solo career, starting with the recording of Dream a Little Dream of Me. The song quickly became a sensation, but that success came with intense pressure, especially about her appearance. When she landed a major performance contract at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, Cass saw it as her chance to prove she could shine without her old band. However, in trying to please the public and producers, she threw herself into an extreme diet. For 7 months, Cass ate only 3 days a week and fasted the other 4, dropping nearly 1/3 of her body weight, from over 300 pounds to a dangerously low level. Though the weight came off, her health rapidly declined. Right before her solo debut at Caesar's Palace, Cass was so weak she had to rely on stimulants just to stand on stage. She was battling acute tonsillitis, vocal cord hemorrhaging, mononucleosis, and a dangerous case of hepatitis, all caused by her hazardous new eating habits. She wasn't prepared for what was coming. As Cass Elliot geared up for her solo debut at Caesar's Palace, Las Vegas was lit up with excitement and high expectations. Big names like Sammy Davis Jr., Jimi Hendrix, and Mia Farrow filled the audience, eager to hear the voice that once captivated the world. But behind the curtain, Cass was in a state of extreme exhaustion. After months of brutal dieting, her body was so frail she hadn't even rehearsed a single song. When the lights came on, Cass stepped onto the stage, trembling but determined. The entire room held its breath, but the voice that had once echoed around the world was now thin and fragile, barely audible. Per her contract, Cass was required to perform 2 sets each night, with only a short break in between. After the first show fell flat, she still pushed herself to return to the stage. But her voice weakened, her breath shortened, and the audience's sympathy quickly faded. People began to grow restless and walked out mid-show. Caesar's Palace canceled her contract the very same night. The press tore her dream apart. Newsweek cruelly compared Cass's Vegas debut to the Titanic going down. She returned home in a deep depression, feeling she had failed in both her career and her love life. But in those long, hopeless nights, Cass still had one guiding light: her young daughter, Owen. She once said, "I can lose everything, but I must never lose my child." Cass became a devoted mother, fiercely protective of her daughter from the spotlight and gossip. She fired any nanny who became too attached, fearing her child might grow up in the same whirlwind of fame and pain she had endured. She fiercely guarded her daughter's privacy, keeping her out of the headlines. More importantly, when the press discovered her child, Cass firmly refused to reveal the father's identity. That didn't stop the media from wildly speculating. But darker rumors followed Cass throughout her career. She was known for hosting legendary Hollywood parties with the biggest stars, alongside some far more disturbing guests. One account claimed Cass had once hosted none other than the infamous cult leader Charles Manson and his followers at her home. No one knew just how close she was to Manson, but the association was enough for some to view her differently after the horrifying Tate murders. After the Mamas and the Papas broke up, Cass's relationship with John Phillips became more strained than ever. In a heated argument, John pointed his finger directly at Cass, accusing her of introducing Charles Manson to the Hollywood scene, even blaming her for the Sharon Tate massacre. Though authorities quickly dismissed such absurd claims, the emotional damage to Cass was devastating. After the bitter failure in Las Vegas, it seemed Cass's solo career had come to an end. But she pushed on, appearing regularly on TV, joining talk shows, and even launching her own specials, Mama Cass and Don't Call Me Mama Anymore. Still, behind the bright smiles on screen, Cass never stopped yearning for true love. In 1971, she believed she'd finally found it in Donald von Weidenmann, a German journalist and heir to a Bavarian barony. Their meeting was described as love at first sight, and the wedding came quickly. But just 2 months later, the marriage ended quietly. She continued her pattern of extreme dieting, desperate to maintain an image in a ruthless entertainment industry. In 1974, while waiting to perform on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson, Cass suddenly collapsed backstage. Medics rushed her to the hospital, but she dismissed it as mere exhaustion. She ignored the warning signs of her deteriorating health after fainting at Carson's show. She went on to complete a 2-week run at the London Palladium. Instead of resting afterward, she kicked off the post-show celebrations with Mick Jagger's 31st birthday party at his private home in Chelsea. Cass left Jagger's party and headed to a late-morning gathering hosted by Georgia Brown in her honor, though guests noted their disappointment. Cass didn't look well. She was blowing her nose, coughing constantly and struggling to breathe. That evening, Cass attended yet another party, this one hosted by American entertainment journalist Jack Martin. Her presence there confused many. Cass was always the life of the party at Martin's gatherings, yet that night, something felt different. Though she appeared cheerful, it was as if she had already let go of life. Her visibly frail condition worried those around her. Still, Cass brushed it off as exhaustion and decided to head home that night. It would be her final public appearance. Cass returned to Harry Nielsen's flat in the wealthy Mayfair district. But the next day, when she didn't emerge from her room, her secretary grew concerned. When he finally opened the bedroom door, he was devastated to find her lying motionless on the bed. She had died from what appeared to be a heart attack. Predictably, rumors quickly twisted the story into something grotesque. Not long after, malicious reports falsely claimed Cass had choked to death on a ham sandwich, a cruel stain on her long struggle with obesity. 4 years later, drummer Keith Moon of The Who would also die in the same bedroom. Cass was only 32. After her death, her daughter Owen went to live with Cass's sister, Leah. But it wasn't until years later that the mystery of Cass's secret lover and Owen's father was finally solved, by none other than Michelle Phillips. The father was Chuck Day, the second guitarist on the hit songs Monday, Monday and California Dreamin'. In October 2022, Cass was posthumously honored with a long-overdue star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, attended by friends and family, including her former bandmate Michelle Phillips. At a time when fat phobia was so normalized that people openly mocked her to her face in front of millions, Cass had to fight harder than most just to be taken seriously and earn the recognition her talent deserved. Today, America still has no woman quite like her, a living example of presence and the sheer power of her voice. When the Mamas and the Papas reunited to be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1998, they performed California Dreamin'. They needed 3 backup singers just to try to replace Cass's voice. They didn't succeed. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos. It was during her time with the Mugwumps that Cass Elliot met Denny Doherty, the man who would capture her heart so completely she was willing to follow him to the ends of the earth. But that love, cruelly, was never returned. Instead of ending up with Denny, Cass entered into a strange marriage with James Hendrix, the group's guitarist, in 1963. It wasn't a romance, but rather a sham marriage to help Hendrix avoid military service. Cass understood that clearly, and she accepted it, because the only thing that connected them was music. 8 months later, the Mugwumps disbanded, and Cass struck out on her own, hoping Denny would follow. But he joined a new group, the New Journeymen, with married couple John and Michelle Phillips. Cass Elliot was willing to do anything to share the stage with Denny Doherty, the man she loved. By then, Denny had rejected Cass because of her weight, but he couldn't deny her talent, and he knew she was the missing piece of the New Journeymen. Still, John Phillips didn't want Cass in the band. He claimed her voice was too low for the group's range. But publicly, Phillips gave a different excuse. He stated that Cass's voice didn't suit the new journeyman's style. Behind closed doors, however, he harshly criticized her appearance. Phillips believed Cass was too heavy to join the group. Her already fragile confidence struggled to survive that brutal truth throughout her career and life. In an era where slender women like Audrey Hepburn were considered the beauty standard, Cass became a symbol of not fitting the mold, both physically and spiritually. Cass felt she had no shot, despite John Phillips's repeated rejections. According to Michelle Phillips, Cass desperately wanted to join the new band to get closer to